Okay, my name is Paula Bradley. I specialise speech and language therapy with acquired brain injury. And today I'm going to be talking about common communication problems following acquired brain injury. Okay, so today, first of all, we're going to look at our components of normal communication. Then we'll have a look at some of the communication difficulties that happen with people following acquired brain injury. And then we'll have a look at the impact of those communication disorders on people with acquired brain injury, okay? So acquired brain injury can actually result in many different types of communication difficulties. And indeed, quite often, if the area of speech or language is damaged following brain injury, quite often our people are said to be able to communicate better than they speak. So they may have a problem getting the words across, they have a problem being understood, but usually their intention is really clear. On the other hand, in the case of when it's either the social centres or there's frontal damage for people, or indeed, a mixture generalised damage, what you can find is that these people communicate better than they speak. And those are the kind of people I want to really concentrate on today with those kind of problems. For everybody with a communication problem, some people will recover quickly, but for others it may be in stops and starts, or it could be a lifelong process. The whole range of communication disorders can actually be described quite well. Going through this list, if people find that their loved one following acquired brain injury has any one of these problems, they could really impact on them as a significant communication disorder, such as understanding conversation instructions, using the right words at the right time, making themselves understood, remembering the contents of conversations or experiences, starting conversations, keeping up conversations, being able to answer in a timely fashion in conversation, giving messages and engaging in conversation in an appropriate and efficient manner, interacting in a socially acceptable manner, so again using appropriate facial expression, body posture, body language, and reading and writing, whether it be for work, for community, or for pleasure, reasoning and decision making while communicating, keeping up with communication and particularly conversations in a group, and then also what kind of job they had before, or what job they might be hoping to get back to, and their performance in academic or vocational areas. Now, putting a name on these problems, because there are quite technical names associated with these sort of different difficulties. If you have a speech problem, it's usually referred to as a dysarthria, and that means that there's some difficulty in actually articulating the speech. If you have a voice problem, it's usually called a dysphonia. And then there would be a difficulty either with hoarseness or breathiness, or some problem in managing the pitch and loudness of your voice. And then the third speech disorder would be a dyspraxia, and that really means a problem in sequencing sounds, which would have the same effect as reducing the intelligibility of somebody's speech. With a language difficulty, the name for an acquired language difficulty is dysphasia, and that means a problem both in spoken and written language, in understanding and expressing yourself as well as what you would like. So often, because the written language side is involved as well, that would include a dyslexia and a dysgraphia. Cognitive communication is the area of rules of social engagement, managing conversations, and managing certain grammar words. So what I'm saying there really is the rules of social interaction that we've all learned from when we were very little, and these can be disrupted following acquired brain injury. After brain injury, typically people would say about 2% of our people have dysphasia. So that's the language disorder. And if we just go back and have a look at that, with dysphasia, quite often what you find, people would describe it as like being in a foreign country and not knowing the language, even though it's your own language. And this would be some examples of a personal experience of how people would actually would comment on what it's like having dysphasia. Can't remember blooming name, to spell I can't, I couldn't understand what it said, I like dumb, I got the knowledge but I haven't got the use it, I know the right thing but the thingamy, the what's it, see the wrong bit comes out. So as you can see, it's like problem both with words, how you put them together, and also in understanding. About 34% of people have been reported to have dysarthria and apraxia, particularly with severe or following a severe acquired brain injury. So what does that result in? Again, if we just go back and have a look at that, with the dysarthria, it usually results in, as I said, problems with articulation, but it could also be slowed speech. Could also be problems with unintelligibility, or with particularly then with voice, on the voice side, people with voice problems, if their quality is affected, this can really impact on how a listener actually understands their intention. But we'll have a look at what personal experiences, the examples of what people would say about this. Some people would say, you know, when I talk, people think I'm lazy, I can't talk as well, it's so slow. People think I'm drunk because I slur my words. And indeed, some of our people with acquired brain injury can have trouble getting served drink in a pub because of that very judgment being made. They treat me like I'm simple because I can't talk right, or people pretend to understand me, and it's very embarrassing. Even though those speech and language difficulties can have quite an impact following acquired brain injury, in fact it's reported that about over 81% of people following acquired brain injury have what we call cognitive communication difficulties. So what are these? These are the kind of problems that impact on all social interactions, like self-expression skills. And many people after an acquired brain injury might report that they find it hard to know how to interact. So they may indeed have the words and they may indeed have the speech, but actually the rules of social engagement, when to say what and how to say it and how much to say, and how to gauge other people's interest and intention, all of this can be now more difficult for them. So again, some personal experience of cognitive communication disorders. I used to be the life of the soul of the party, now I can't. I'm never sure anymore if I've said something already. They were talking to me and sometimes I didn't even know. They'd say something, but at the end of the sentence they were saying I didn't know what it was because I'm still thinking of the first little bit. Or as a mother reported about her son Mark, who talks all around the shop now, he often misses the whole point. When he tries to just give you the gist, he takes even longer. He mixes up steps in telling you how to do something. And people will describe their heads getting fuzzy, particularly when there are too many people talking at the one time, or being in group conversation. And indeed, the whole social scene of like going, you know, enjoying going out with their friends, that can really change, because now perhaps all they feel they can do is to sit quiet, because they don't know how to either get into the conversation or they're having difficulty following the conversation. I just don't get it. I feel so stupid is not an uncommon reporting of somebody following acquired brain injury with cognitive communication difficulty. Okay, so what actually is involved in this? The executive and social language centres are often the areas that are damaged when there are cognitive communication problems, and these are the areas that manage conversation, how to manage social interactions and how to manage complex words, particularly of time and space. So the damage may result in what we could probably describe as if we've lost the code book. We've lost the code book of social rules of engagement. And so what's involved in this whole process of social language and how we manage conversations, it's got a whole lot of skills involved. On one side we've got the cognitive skills like attention, memory and organisation. On the other side we've got your verbal language skills such as speech, listening, understanding, reading and writing as well. And then you've got all your non-verbal language skills. So again, how you use your body language, your facial expression, tone, mood and intention. So our success in society actually really depends on all of that working well. If you think about it, before we may begin a conversation, particularly with somebody where it's quite important with us, this could be the sort of questions, or these could be the sort of questions that we're asking ourselves before we even begin to reply. Like, how do I feel about this message? What's the best way of saying it? What does it sound like out loud? What do they know already? Will I just hint or state the facts? How do I want them to react? What's polite here? Who's in the company? When should I get round to it? So all of that is happening in very, very quick time, like thousandths of a second, as we think about what am I going to say back to you when you've either just asked me a question or you've told me something and I want to make a comment on it. So also what we often find is that our people, as part of this difficulty, actually translate words literally, and they rely more on actual words said for meaning. So particularly in our society where we use a lot of figurative language or idioms so much of the time and often have an indirect way of actually telling people stuff, this can result in a lot of confusion and difficulty for our people. So the thing like, I'll be ready in a minute. Well, a minute may not often mean a minute in our world. It nearly killed me to get here on time. I'm all over the shop today. You must have a million things to do. You nearly put your foot in it. You did a right good job of that, when perhaps you didn't. Is that the time? Now don't hit the roof, but, or going so early. These would be quite common phrases that we could all use in just social interactions with our friends. But quite often what we're saying is not what we mean. And we depend on our friends understanding that code and really getting what we're saying underneath the words that we're using. And unfortunately our people The most difficult part of understanding for them is when people don't say what they mean. When the words that we use are not actually what reflects our intention. So people with acquired brain injury will often have less sensitivity to contextual cues in a situation. They're less sensitive to the underlying, maybe what's going on in that situation. And because of all of that, they may have problems with self-monitoring, so they're not actually checking themselves out to see, am I reacting the way I meant to react or the way I intended to react? And also they may be poor at thinking on their feet. So they need time to actually begin to respond. And in social conversation and interactions, there usually isn't any time. And when there is an uncomfortable length of time, usually it impacts on the other person in terms of what's going on, that we're not getting a response. And they may be no longer clear of rules on how much and how often to say. So what do our people find and report mostly? Mostly what they say is there are certain social situations that are easier than others. So mostly what people would say is, give me a one-to-one in a quiet situation and I can manage that quite well when there aren't lots of other things going on. And that group conversation is much, much harder. Another factor could be, it's just a casual interaction. So we're just looking at social speech or greetings or light chit-chat, as opposed to something that perhaps is more formal or more urgent. So again, when there's no pressure, it's much easier for them to be able to use all of those skills to actually see, can they get across what it is they want to say. Deliberate thinking versus automatic routines. So again, in our lives, we all have so many automatic cues that we'd say, like for example, I'm nearly ready. And if I say that to somebody, that would take it that they know it's time for them to get ready as well. Unfortunately, where that automatic routine might be lost, and many others like that, following acquired brain injury, it then demands for the other person to actually find another way maybe to say it, and to say it more directly. And that can be uncomfortable because we're not used to saying, I'm nearly ready, are you nearly ready, you need to get ready, particularly if it's our partner or an adult, somebody we're close to with an acquired brain injury. Now we're finding we're having to say things much more literally in order for them to get it. So likewise too, relaxed and familiar is going to be so much easier than strange and unpredictable. If something is of no interest, it actually is much less demanding for us than something that we really need to hear. We need to hear everything that you're saying and I need to understand it. So for example, in an interview with a doctor again maybe, or if there was a message being done over a counter and you really needed to get your point across, where you have to be really specific, it can be hugely pressurised. And when there's no attachment to the communication itself in terms of what do I need to get out of this, when again on the more social side it's going to be so much easier, whereas if I'm on a mission and I really need to know something, it's like, how am I going to know how to work up to it? Because sometimes we can in our own social skills we have to learn how not to be too abrupt or not sound abrupt and work up to what it is that we want to say. Quiet and noisy can make a huge difference. Typically our people following acquired brain injury have a tolerance of probably about 100% less than we would normally. So if you put them in a noisy environment with telly on, in a pub environment, in a social environment with a lot of noise in the background, they can get overloaded very quickly. And as a result of that, not only can their, if their energy has been up, that they can get fatigued very, very quickly with having to do all that extra effort. Okay, so really what I'm saying in all of that, and kind of summing it up, I think one of the most important things that people following acquired brain injury would report is that in learning and using these social codes again, it's like having to learn what was automatic and unconscious has had to go right back to being deliberate and conscious. And when we do something that was automatic and now have to think about it and think about every bit of it, what happens is it becomes really effortful. We get really, really tired. It really impacts on our confidence because I know in the past this was easy and it's not easy now. And also I get really anxious. Am I going to get it right? Particularly when I'm in a situation, a social situation where I really want to get it right. And I don't want to lose face. And I want to look good in terms of getting across what I want to get across. So today what I've looked at, is the whole scope of what it means when we are in communication with each other. And really our ability to function in everyday life is only possible in terms of verbal communication because of the way our brain functions, interact and communicate with each other. And the thing about acquired brain injury is that damage in one area can actually have an impact on lots of other areas. And therefore, for example, that attention is needed for almost everything. The other thing is that less capacity or resources are available for processing events and information every day, so overload is really common. And the mental effort of more deliberate thinking can easily cause fatigue. Impacts of brain injuries are permanent, so like how to manage these can need new code books, not even just new code books for the person with acquired brain injury, but also new code books for their family, for their carers, for their friends, for their community. And really compensatory strategies and support is often the way to go for what might be lifelong issues. And just as every head is different, so every brain injury is different. So only some of the information raised in this session may actually apply to your family member. If you have concerns about any significant communication problems related to your family member, I would recommend that you seek referral to a speech and language therapist for a full assessment, just to see exactly what might be going on. So thank you.